a story that will make you believe in love again. This is the story of an unpredictable and atypical romance with a happy ending that two people thought they'd never have. It all started in 1980. The world was a very different place to the one we know now. It was a world of sexism and racism, where thinking was strictly limited to men. As the internet was non-existent at the time, people had to actually leave their houses in order to mingle. One of the best places to meet new people is at clubs, which is where this incredible tale of lost and found love begins. It was a night like any other at the Falcons Next Club of the Homestead Air Force Base. The music was playing, the drinks were being poured, and people were dancing the night away. It was a place where military people and locals could come together to have a good time, relaxing at the end of a hard-working week, catching up with friends, and just enjoying their present moment. One of the two special people in the Homestead Air Force Base Club that night was Kay Gibbs. She was partying wild with three of her closest friends, as was their habit at the end of stressing days. She wasn't a military woman, but she lived near the base and so often spent time at the club there. Kay was a divorcee, having already had a tragic experience with love and relationships. She definitely wasn't looking for love on that particular night. In fact, she even had a special rule that she went by, saying that she wouldn't date any man she met at the club. Moreover, she had her 3-year-old son who still needed her care, and there was no room in her life for emotional drama. Her heart had been broken for enough times, and all she cared about now was taking care of her little boy and living her single mom life to the fullest. The other person in the club that night was Michael Martinovic, or Marty, as his family and friends like to call him. Marty was in the military and was stationed in the Homestead area of Florida. Just like Kay, he'd often visited the club after busy days, since it was the best place he could find around where he could have a good time with his friends and forget about high job stress and worries. When asked about this moment years later, both Marty and Kay could remember with very vivid details how it all happened. They even still recall exactly what they felt at that particular moment, as if it were only yesterday. Kay says that she noticed Marty's military boots shining in the dimly lit room, while Marty says the first thing he saw of Kay was her eyes. When the lights in the club came on, their gaze met and something clicked between them. Kay described the magical moment as instant attraction. Marty, meanwhile, said that their first sight of each other was electric, to say the least. Everyone who has ever been in a long and lasting relationship can remember the very first time they met with the love of their lives. It's always a special moment, filled with wild butterflies and excitement, as you both try to talk and act naturally while dealing with the crazy attraction and sensations that blur your senses. That was the case with Kay and Marty. Their moment was all fire and flames, mixed with some shyness and awkwardness. Marty walked up to the young single mom, trying his best to keep his cool as he initiated a conversation with her, asking the usual questions, trying to build up a link with her that would eventually develop into something more, if things went as smoothly as he wanted them to. The next step was clear in Marty's mind. He had his plan set in stone and knew exactly what to do after each step. Since he and Kay seemed to be having a good conversation and had felt an initial attraction to her, one he could feel was mutual. He wanted to keep in touch. He decided to take the plunge and ask her for her phone number when they were about to part later that night. Kay, however, didn't give him the answer he was looking for. Kay was actually reluctant to give Marty her phone number. After all, she was pretty serious about her special rule regarding not dating any guys in the club. In addition to that, romance was the last thing on her mind, and she was surely not interested in starting a new relationship at the time. She politely refused to give him her phone number or anything he could contact her through. She did enjoy that night's conversation, but that was it for her. She had no intention of engaging in anything more. Marty, however, didn't see that as a stop. He really liked Kay, and he wasn't going to give up easily on her. He had to leave the club as duty was calling, but as soon as he was finished, he went right back, hoping he'd find her there that night too. Lucky for him, Kay was there with her friend. He'd approached her and asked her for her number one more time. There were plenty of other girls in the club, But Marty saw something special in Kay, and he knew she was the one he wanted to spend the rest of his life with. Marty didn't want to give up on her, not just yet. Even after she rejected him the first time, he still persisted and tried his luck again, and he did well not to. Kay ended up giving him her number the second time and agreed to stay in touch with him. She had a thing for him too and decided to give it a chance. They talked for about a week on the phone, getting to know each other a bit more from a safe distance. When they felt that the time was right, they arranged their first ever date. Even though the pair had already met and spoken at the club, their first date felt as the first time meeting. Stressful and exciting, mixed up with all sorts of paradoxical emotions, like is the case with most first dates. The excitement of going on a first date is one of a kind. The butterflies you get when you're getting ready to go on that first special meeting with someone, along with the shyness at the beginning, are things that mark first dates and would later be remembered with much affection. Kay and Marty were just two young people looking to spend time together. They enjoyed each other's company and wanted to give things a try. Wherever they headed was fine. Their first date went amazingly, and their crush for each other only became stronger. It was only natural for the blossoms of love to grow between Kay and Marty. They'd both remember those early days of their relationship so fondly, with Marty saying that the whole thing blindsided him, as he never expected to find love right there in his own military base. Kay, meanwhile, was always pleasantly surprised by what a gentleman Marty was to her. He was very kind and caring, always doing his best to make her feel cared for and protected. They were the perfect couple, and time only made their relationships stronger and their love deeper. The perfect pair discovered new wonderful things about each other every day that passed by, while making more happy memories together. Everything seemed to be just right for them, with Kay saying that she loved him more and more each day, even though she never actually told him how strong her feelings had become. Sadly, as the old saying goes, all good things must come to an end. Even though their relationship seemed to be perfect, the end was in sight for Kay and Marty, and it was coming close. Marty was, after all, a military man, and one day after spending several months getting to know Kay and falling in love with her, he learned that he was being reassigned to a military base in Guam. Their relationship would have to come to an end, and both Kay and Marty were heartbroken by the news. They didn't want to upset each other any more than the news did, so they tried to part on the best possible terms. When the time came to say goodbye, Kay and Marty decided to part as friends, even though Kay called it a gut-wrenching experience. To say goodbye, they lied on the floor and hugged, a heartbreaking hug that tore their hearts apart, believing they weren't seeing each other ever again. Since Kay and Marty officially decided to break up when he left, the only real choice they had was to simply try to move on and forget about one another. They had no means to stay in touch as the internet didn't exist in those days. Many relationships had to end because of distance, as they just had no means of staying in touch as we do now, thanks to social media and different internet apps. Marty and Kay did the only thing they could. They moved on. They'd build their own lives away from each other, including meeting new people and beginning new relationships too. They had a wonderful time together, but they both knew that it simply wasn't meant to be, that life had other plans in store. They both decided to forget about the feelings they had for one another and find strength to carry on with their lives, away from each other. As they grew older, they both met new people and fell in love many times after. Both Kay and Marty got married in the years that followed. They had new lives with new partners. However, their love lives weren't meant to last, as they got divorced a few years after their marriages. It's safe to say that they both had their share of ups and downs and have seen much of life. Did Kay and Marty ever think of one another in the midst of their everyday life? Well, in a TV interview many years later, both of them admitted that they did sometimes think about the amazing 9 months and wonder what the other one was doing, how their life was going at the time, if they'd found love with someone else, and what things would be like if they stayed together. Marty says he didn't constantly think of Kay, as he had other relationships and other people he cared about in his life. She did cross his mind every now and then, wondering how she was getting on with her son and if she ever thought of him. Kay also spent some time thinking of Marty, and even though she fell in love and married another man, She said it never felt quite as passionate as it was with Marty in the few months they spent together. Kay tried to get on with her life and raise her son after Marty left for the military. She had a hard time getting over the fact that she couldn't be with the man she loved, probably never see him again, and was again heartbroken by a man. The moment she decided to give love a chance, it bailed on her. She was a dedicated and caring mother who didn't spare any time or effort to look after her boy and give him the life he deserved. Kay ended up getting a good job with a telecommunications company. Things seemed to be going pretty well. She had a stable life and her son was happy. She couldn't ask for more. But good things in Kay's life have a tendency not to last. In 1999, a disaster struck. Kay developed an inner ear disorder called Meniere's disease, which changed Kay's life 180 degrees. Meniere's disease, also known as MD, is a disorder of the inner ear. It leads to a range of different symptoms and can be quite mild in some cases, but very severe in others. Some of the worst symptoms of Meniere's disease are vertigo, in addition to hearing loss and ringing in the ears in extreme situations. Usually, Meniere's disease only affects one ear, but it can affect both in some cases. The episodes of vertigo and ringing can last for several hours, and as the disease gets worse, it can eventually cause total hearing loss. It's a disease that affects around 1 in every 1,000 people, and it tends to affect women more than men. Kay was affected very badly. She had to deal with terrible vertigo episodes. She had to spend long 18 months in bed due to the disorder. Initially placed on short-term disability, it was later changed to long-term disability. Every day her suffering would only get worse, and she eventually had to have a surgery to heal, as medication wasn't working in her situation, only kept aggravating. Kay and her doctors hoped that surgery would be the answer to her disease. She would finally be able to get out of bed and get back to her regular life and job. However, the doctors also told her that the operation was risky and it could lead to dangerous side effects, a permanent hearing in the worst case, which was a high risk to take, considering her situation. Either way, she knew she had to do it. She owed her son that. At the end of the long surgery Kay had undergone, she was faced with some mixed news. The good news was that the surgery had been successful in treating the disease and freeing Kay of her horrible symptoms. The bad news was that she lost hearing in one of her ears, leaving her half-deaf. Kay had received quite the shock, learning that she'd have to get used to relying on just one ear, but she was happy to finally be cured of her vertigo and tinnitus, and ready as ever to get back to work. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized she didn't really want to go back to her boring old job. Kay still decided to go back to work for the time being before making any radical decisions. Besides, she needed to first find a replacement before leaving the place that sent her a check at the end of the month. However, after spending just a couple of weeks back at work with the phone company, she came to a clear realization. She wanted to do something else with her life. The job just wasn't fun or enjoyable anymore, and after having gone into hospital for her operation, she felt like life was too short to do things she didn't enjoy doing. Kay finally took a radical decision, one that was about to shift her life, and informed her boss that was resigning. Kay made a very bold decision, but now she needed to find somewhere else and fast. She wasn't making any money at all, and even though she had some savings, she couldn't rely on them forever. She wanted a job that she could really enjoy, something where she could be her own boss and feel happy and fulfilled going to work each day. This was all in the early 2000s when the internet was starting to take off, and the concept of online shopping was slowly becoming the next big trend. So Kay started to take an interest in consignment shops. Kay had already got a little experience in buying and selling things online. She'd sold some collectible items herself and enjoyed the process. That was something she could definitely do for a living. She decided to get started on her plan and make her business come to reality. She started visiting consignment shops and getting involved with auctions and estate sales. She began buying and reselling unique and interesting items, and in November 2002, her business went to the next level. She saw a for sale sign in one of the consignment shops she visited regularly and was tired of working from home, so she decided to speak to the owner and buy the shop. That was when her business known as Kay's Designer Consignment, truly began. In only her first week of owning her own shop, she broke all of the previous sales records from the past decade. As word started to spread, more and more people went to her store, and eventually she got so much business that she had to move to a whole new space over in Ormond Beach, Florida. Everything was going great, and Kay was having the time of her life in such a rewarding job. She had always been a very sociable and chatty person, so she loved to work in a business that let her connect with people. But things were too good to remain the same. In the summer of 2006, she was working as usual when she suddenly got a terrible headache that didn't go away no matter how many painkillers she took. She decided to go to the doctor, who gave her various tests to do. Kay was diagnosed with a cerebrospinal fluid leak. It was the second big illness she'd had in recent years, making her stop and think about what she truly wanted from life. Luckily, she was able to find a surgeon who could heal the fluid leak inside her body and help her get back to normal. She'd suffered from almost a constant headache for about 18 months, but finally, she was starting to feel better. Her marriage broke down a few months later, and since she'd been suffering so badly, her business was struggling too. That's when her son had a great idea. As a computer programming expert, he suggested to his mom that she should move the business onto Facebook, as that's where a lot of people were doing their deals in modern times. In 2009, Kay set up a Facebook page for her shop. Her presence on Facebook was purely a business decision for Kay, but as she spent more time on the site, seeing all the people on there and thinking of all the folks she'd known in the past, her thoughts began to drift back towards Marty. And one night, she decided to look him up. She typed his name into the search bar 28 years after last seeing him, and a profile appeared. The name matched, but there was no photo, so she couldn't really be sure if it was him or not. Kay knew that the odds of finding Marty at the first attempt were probably quite small, but it's not like she had anything to lose, so she did it anyway. She knew that life was too short to hesitate and hold back from decisions like these. Life could change in an instant, and it was so important to make the most of the time we have. She decided to take the risk and send a message to the Marty account, asking if he was the same man she'd once met at the Homestead Air Force Base back in 1980. Kay's message simply said, "Is this the same Marty that was in Homestead in 1980/81 with the Air Force Security Police? If so, it's Kay, and I'm wondering how you are." She had to wait a couple of days for a reply, but her heart leaped when she saw it. It really was her Marty after all. Marty couldn't believe he was hearing from her again after all those years, and he replied to confirm that he was the very same man she once been in love with, almost 3 decades ago. From that point on, they started messaging back and forth, learning all about each other's lives. Marty and Kay couldn't really believe their luck at having found each other all over again. Social media had brought them back together, as it has for so many other old friends and connections, and it gave them a new chance to get to know one another. They spent many hours in the following days and weeks sending each other messages, learning all about the things they'd been doing. Kay told Marty about her son, her marriage and divorce, her business, and her health issues. Marty, meanwhile, updated Kay on what he'd been doing and how his life had been going in the 28 years since they'd been apart as well. And the more they talked, the more they felt like the spark they once had was still there, as if they were never set apart. Kay and Marty eventually both admitted to each other they were in love all over again. And now that they were older and wiser, they didn't want to waste any time at all. Marty asked her to come to his place in Salt Lake City. Then, he said he was going to sell his house and drive all the way back to Florida with her. Kay knew it felt right and said yes straight away. In September of 2009, she took a flight from Florida to Utah, landing at Salt Lake City and meeting the love of her life. When Marty and Kay got back to Florida, Kay introduced Marty to her business and asked if he'd be interested in becoming a part of it. Marty was a little hesitant at first, but the more time he spent at the shop and understood how it worked, the more comfortable he began to feel. Kay says that the pair of them worked together like a machine, not even needing words to tell each other what to do. They both understand the business perfectly, both knowing exactly what's in stock, what needs to be sold, and getting the right prices too. and they're both always thinking of ways to improve the business and take it to the next level. In business, just like in love, Kay and Marty were an absolutely perfect match. Since they didn't want to waste any more time and both knew the value of making the most of life, they decided to get married. Life was short and they had no more time to waste. Their love only seemed to grow stronger the more time they spent together, and it really felt like they'd never ever been apart. Kay and Marty were quite truly meant to be. They both feel so lucky to have been given a second chance to make their relationship work, and each and every day feels like a gift. They'd both agree that they were made for one another, feeling totally compatible, enjoying all the same things, and having lots of fun each and every day. It's so wonderful to see that these two amazing people got the happiness they both deserved. They had to wait a while to find it, but they both agreed that it was worth the wait. Now, they are living the dream of so many people, spending every day with their soulmate, happy and completely in love. Both Marty and Kay experienced life's ups and downs, both in business, marriage, and health. They've seen and done it all, and they had to wait a while for everything to fall into place. But in the end, love brought them back together, proving that it's never too late to reconnect with the right person. And most importantly, what is meant to be will be.